Right, well, it's 10 o'clock, so should we get started? Perfect. Well, good morning to everyone that joined and welcome. Thank you for joining and thank you for your time. Today is the first of many snapshots that Primerio will be hosting together with leading counsel in various African jurisdictions, covering inter alia competition law developments. Just to kick off with any hassles, please will everyone just ensure that their cameras and microphones remain off until the Q&A session, which we'll be conducting at the end. So the speakers for today's snapshot include Gina, Lodolo, and myself from Primerio Law Incorporated, and Ibrahim Sarr of Bennani Associes, who Primerio collaborates with closely in relation to transactions in Africa. By way of brief background of Primerio, we're a Pan-African law firm with our head office in Johannesburg, South Africa, and we have a regional office in Kenya as well as in Mauritius, where Gina is kindly joining us from today. We also have strategic partners in several key African jurisdictions, and our primary focus is on competition law, including cartel investigations, merger control, abuse of dominance complaints, foreign direct investment, market inquiries, and the like. Although it's not particularly relevant for purposes of today's webinar, Primerio also offers white-collar crime, general commercial, trade, and regulatory legal services. Bennani Associes is an independent firm with a core focus on serving international companies and foreign law firms with businesses in Morocco. And the firm serves as the North African region area through offices in Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, and the French-speaking African countries through its offices in the Ivory Coast and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Bennani Associes provides both legal advice and litigation services to guarantee its clients and international partners a full service support. The area of expertise of Bennani Associes covers notably mergers and acquisitions, corporate law, foreign investments, infrastructure projects, finance, labor law, and naturally also competition law. I now hand over to Gina, who will provide a brief background on the Moroccan merger control regime and give you some insight into our recent experience with the Moroccan Competition Council.
Thanks, Nicola. So before we kick off, let me give this brief introduction to the Morocco regime. The Morocco Council was established in 2018 and is increasingly becoming more active, particularly in the last 2 years. In 2022, there were almost 140 merger notifications received by the Council, and the Council issued its first sanctions for gun jumping. In 3 cases of gun jumping, the Council imposed a financial penalty of approximately 900,000 euros. In addition, as part of its educational approach, the chairman regularly invites companies to comply with competition rules and launched a campaign to regularize non-notified concentration transactions between June 2022 and December 2022. The regularization procedure is, however, subject to a payment penalty of 1% of the turnover in Morocco, with a cap of 370,000 euros per transaction and 900,000 for several transactions carried out by the same group. As the merger regime is a mandatory and suspensory regime, Morocco is an important regime from a merger control perspective and one which parties to foreign transactions should take into consideration. So the Morocco competition laws were recently amended, which is the topic of discussion today, and the amended decree of the merger control regime came into effect on the 24th of May 2023. These amendments have demonstrated an increase in enforcement activities undertaken by the Council in respect of merger control activities. So at a high level, the main amendments include increasing the minimum turnover thresholds for merger control filings, and the worldwide turnover is now assessed together with the local turnover. They've also introduced a simplified filing form for competitively benign transactions. They've introduced a filing fee, and they've provided an expedited process, which comes at an additional cost and approval by the Council. So we will expand on these today, but firstly, before these amendments, we recently dealt with a transaction where the target had no sales or activities in Morocco, yet the transaction was still caught by the thresholds due to the acquirer meeting the threshold alone. As the target was not present in Morocco, it is clear that the transaction had no effect in Morocco, and therefore the filing to us seemed superfluous, although it was still a mandatory filing. In this regard, the transaction was caught by the thresholds because the thresholds looked at the worldwide turnover of all the parties exceeding approximately 70 million euros, or the average turnover in Morocco by at least 2 of the parties exceeding 22 million euros. So in this case, one party alone can meet the threshold, as there was no minimum set for the target alone, which is what is used commonly in other jurisdictions. So where the acquirer alone has sufficient worldwide turnover, the thresholds would then be met. We found this quite unusual that there was no exception to the notification threshold in instances where the target had no turnover or any presence in Morocco. So what we established during this transaction was that in practice and according to the council, the absence of an impact of a foreign-to-foreign transaction on the Moroccan market was not a criteria to release parties from their obligation to file. So in other words, foreign-to-foreign mergers that just meet the thresholds have to notify the council regardless of whether the transaction actually has or doesn't even have an effect on the Moroccan market. So Ibrahim, the amendments have now increased the turnover threshold and look at the worldwide turnover and the local turnover thresholds, with both of these needing to be met. Could you please expand on how these thresholds have now been amended?
Sure, thank you, Gina. As explained earlier, now in Morocco, we have a combination of a worldwide turnover and a local turnover, meaning that it will be no longer sufficient to reach only the worldwide threshold to trigger a notification in Morocco. Under the Moroccan law, a concentration must be notified to the Competition Council when one of the 3 thresholds is met. The thresholds under the Moroccan law are alternative. If one of them is met, the parties are required to notify. We have what we call a worldwide threshold, which is triggered if the worldwide turnover of all the relevant parties exceeds 1.2 billion Moroccan dirham, approximately 111 million euros, and the turnover in Morocco by one of the parties exceeds 50 million dirhams, approximately 4.6 million euros. We have also what we call the Moroccan threshold, which is triggered if the turnover in Morocco of all the relevant parties exceeds 400 million dirhams, approximately 37 million euros, and the turnover realized individually by at least 2 undertakings or groups involved in the transaction exceeds 50 million dirhams. And finally, we have what we call the market share threshold, which is triggered if the undertakings that are party to the concentration transaction or that are subject of the concentration or the undertaking that are economically linked to them have generated together during the previous calendar year more than 40% of the sale, purchases, or other transactions on the national market in Morocco of identical or substitutable goods, products, or services on a significant part of it.
Thanks, Ibrahim. I think that that local threshold test is a welcome development that may come some way in assisting to limit the amount of transactions that will now meet this threshold, because it introduces now a worldwide and local instead of just worldwide turnover, which is, I think, a welcome development. But it still seems that the acquirer could trigger this threshold alone, as the amendment doesn't introduce a separate threshold for the target alone. So do you think this amendment may assist in still limiting some notifications where you don't have both parties present in the Moroccan market?
Yes, indeed. The acquirer can, to respond to your first question, the acquirer can satisfy alone the worldwide threshold and the market share threshold. And more generally, each of the relevant party can satisfy alone this threshold. For the assessment of an antitrust filing in Morocco, it should be noted that the seller is always relevant in the assessment of the threshold test in Morocco. So the seller should not be excluded from the assessment. And additionally, we should also note that there is no exemption under the Moroccan law for foreign-to-foreign transaction, meaning that when the conditions to file are met, the parties are required to proceed with the filing in Morocco, because the Competition Council considers that only itself has the power to assess the impact of the transaction on the local market. And by the way, I'd like to add that each of the treasuries now integrate the Moroccan turnover in such a treasury. So now the discussion about a nexus or an impact on the Moroccan market is no longer seems to no longer play an important role in the discussion. And to answer to your second question, I confirm that the combination of the worldwide threshold with the local threshold will now limit the amount of notification received by the Competition Council.
Thanks, Ibrahim. It's useful to know that consideration of the local turnover will somehow or somewhat limit notifications, although there could still be instances where one relevant party still satisfies the threshold, especially where the seller is also taken into account. But Nicola, do you want to take us through the filing fee amendments?
Sure, thanks, Gina. Until the recent amendments, the MCC's merger control regime required no filing fee to be paid. And in terms of international best practice, we can see from the ICC's commentary on merger control that the absence of a merger filing fee is definitely the favored approach or regime. And the rationale behind this approach is that they want to ensure that merging parties don't weigh up the penalty for failure to notify against the payment of a filing fee and thereafter they elect not to notify. So in these circumstances, the agency would prefer to be aware of the transaction and grant approval rather than impose a hefty filing fee. So at the very least, the ICC has recommended that the filing fees should be strictly proportionate to the actual administrative cost and linked to the likely impact of the transaction on the country that's concerned, as opposed to having a tax element. And while the filing fee now imposed by the Council is not a particularly hefty filing fee, it is noteworthy that parties remain liable to pay the filing fee even when they've decided to abandon the transaction, which may have a further impact on their considerations regarding whether or not they're going to notify the proposed transaction. I think on that note, Ibrahim would probably be best placed to walk us through the new filing fee and whether he thinks that the filing fee is proportionate to the administrative costs of reviewing the merger, and also whether, Ibrahim, you think the filing fee and the duty to pay it, despite the abandonment of the transaction, will have an impact on parties deciding whether or not they're going to notify the transaction to the Council. So yeah, Ibrahim, over to you.
Thank you, Nicola. Yes, the filing fee that now we have to pay in the context of the filing with the Competition Council represent 1% of the value of the transaction with a cap of 150,000 dirhams, approximately 14,000 euros, and a minimum of 20,000 Moroccan dirhams. If the party wish to accelerate the filing procedure under the 60-day legal period, the filing fee amounts to 2 per thousand of the value of the transaction, with a cap of 300,000 Moroccan dirhams and a minimum of 40,000 Moroccan dirhams. If the concentration transaction relates to the creation of a new EGV company, the amount of the filing fee to be paid by the notifying party to the Competition Council amounts to 20,000 Moroccan dirhams and 40,000 Moroccan dirhams if the party wish to accelerate the procedure. If the party don't furnish a transaction value to the Competition Council, the maximum filing fee will be applied by the Competition Council. The filing fee must be paid by the notifying party in the context of an acquisition concentration transaction by the acquirer. And the filing fee must be paid within 1 month of the Competition Council decision, even if the party ultimately abandons the transaction. No filing fee should be paid if the Competition Council consider that the concentration transaction was not reportable. Regarding the purpose of the filing fee, it's not explicitly justified by the authorities or the competition council. But on our end, we assume the filing fee is linked to the administrative cost incurred by the competition council for the treatment of the notification. So far, we haven't had any negative feedback from clients about the filing fee to be paid. And these fees, we believe, don't seem an obstacle for the clients to file in Morocco. Actually, currently, most of the clients consider apply for the accelerated procedure, which will imply higher fees to be paid.
Okay, thank you so much. It does seem that the filing fee could be reasonable, but however, I think we'll probably have to see how the council treats transactions in the near future and how parties react thereto as well. I think perhaps you could walk us through from a practical perspective how the new simplified form would be different to the old filing form, which didn't require substantive information where there was no affected market, and whether this would reduce the level of information further and potentially reduce the review period where a simplified form is used.
Yes, indeed. Under the new competition law regime, there is the simplified notification procedure for transactions that do not raise any competitive concern. The simplified filing form will require less information and documents in the initial submission as compared to the requirement under the full filing form, notably when the market is affected. Under the simplified filing requirements, the party must provide basic information on the transaction and its objectives, financial information for the past 3 years, the company accounts, the annual reports, the list of the major shareholders of the company, the party involved, and the list of the transaction, the concentration transaction carried out for the last 3 years, and a description of the parties' activities and their market share in the relevant market. For the process, the party don't just determine and submit simplified notification to the competition council. They need to get the formal approval from the competition council to use the simplified procedure. On her hand, we consider that it's very likely that in practice, the time required for the competition council to review the notification under the simplified procedure will be shorter than a notification under the normal procedure. From a strictly legal standpoint, the simplified procedure is different from the accelerated procedure mentioned earlier by yourself. The guidelines that will be provided by the competition council will list the concentration transaction that will be eligible for the simplified procedure. And just to end, to my knowledge, the competition council has not yet applied the simplified procedure.
All right, thank you. That's useful to know. I think while it would obviously be first prize not to have to notify a transaction where both the acquirer and target are not present in Morocco, it's helpful that there is a simplified form that these types of transactions can fall into. And I think it's also useful for our audience to know that there are ways in which they could expedite their merger clearance. Gina, you're on mute.
Thanks, Nicola. And then I was just going to say, before we wrap up, the amendments allow for the expedited procedure to obtain clearance, but this will be at an additional fee that you would have to pay the council. But you also need to first get approval from the council to apply for this expedited procedure. So Can you give us some insight, Ibrahim, into how long normal merger clearance would take, and now how long the expedited procedure would take, and how parties can apply for this approval to obtain an expedited clearance?
Yeah. The new competition law provides that the party can accelerate the filing procedure under the 60-day legal period. The party will have to request to motivate their request, and the competition council could still refuse if it considered that the request is not sufficiently motivated. The council for now has not provided any formal guidance on how the party can apply for the approval of the accelerated procedure. Currently, we are preparing a request for clients, and we will submit a sample letter to the council where we motivated our request. Regarding the timing, we just received an informal information from the competition council that the time frame for the accelerated procedure will be 1 month from the receipt of the certificate of completeness, and the case handlers have received an informal instruction to do their very best to ensure that the notification is processed within 1 month from the notification date.
Thanks, Ibrahim. That's very useful. And thanks again, Gina. I think we are at the end of our session. We've almost run out of time, but I think today's been a very useful snapshot on the Moroccan merger control regime. If anyone does have a question, I think we could take maybe 1 or 2 questions. So yeah, let's just wait, I think 1 minute. Yeah, I assume no one's going to ask a question. So yeah, thank you very much for your time, Ibrahim and Gina. I think we look forward to the next snapshot, which we'll have in approximately 2 weeks, probably on the Egyptian merger control regime. But for now, thank you very much for your time, and thank you to all the attendees for your time as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.